Walking Dead season premiere recap. The long goodbye. Back in October, The Walking Dead&apos s 8th season began with an exciting, even somewhat hopeful montage, cutting between Rick Grimes in multiple scenarios, some immediate, some potentially imminent. He was seen rousing his troops for a surprise attack on the Saviors, classic Rick. But also standing over a gravesite, leaning despondently against a tree and living in a hazy future where Alexandria is thriving. In the mid-season premiere, titled, cryptically, Honor, both the burial plot and the happy fantasy return. But while the show had previously seemed to suggest that sad Rick and Contended Rick could be two separate, branching possibilities, this episode shut that idea right down. The death is real. The utopia. Maybe not. From where we last left our heroes to what happened to Carl, a refresher memory guide going into Season 8's mid-season premiere. The biggest news from this week is that the confirmation that Carl is indeed gone. One of the series and/apos, longest-running characters, and who and/apos s been around since day one, he suffered a walker bite in last fall and/apos s finale. Now, after an extended deathbed scene, the teen with the eye patch is 6 feet under, buried along with a lot of Rick and/apos s reasons for being who he is. How many times has Sheriff Grimes justified some of his most questionable decisions by saying that he and/apos s doing it to keep Carl safe and to make him a better man? Well, his son just died. Now what? Part of the reason why this week and/apos s episode is so long, way too long, is that it tries to answer that question. What will motivate Rick now? Besides his daughter Judith, that is. She and/apos s mostly left out of all his rumination. For some reason, Honor builds its case for The Walking Dead and/apos s ongoing purpose and meaning by shifting between 3 main storylines, each of which is so somber and muted that it and/apos s often hard to tell right away when a scene transitions from one narrative to the other. In the main plot, Rick and McConn watch Carl die. Yes, it and/apos s as grim as it sounds. Initially, Alexandria and/apos s leader comes in angry, convinced that his town and/apos s aflame, his enemies are loose and his boy is suffering, all because his people were too impatient and distrustful to follow orders. So a large part of this extended farewell involves the kid setting his dad straight, explaining that his mortal wound is just a fluky thing, brought about by him trying to help the vagabond loner Siddiq. The final message the teen intends to deliver before departing this earth is to tell his friends and family to be more compassionate to others and less hardened. Otherwise, this world will never heal. The longer Carl and/apos s death drags out, the more it feels like the show and/apos s writers are struggling to give the moment meaning, especially given that they largely ignoring this character for much of the earlier part of the season. The Siddiq subplot was introduced in the fall premiere, but it wasn't and/apos really a running thread until right before the fateful zombie encounter. To compensate, this episode lingers for over an hour on Carl and/apos s halting, rasping last words. The other 2 storylines are intended to reinforce the first. In one, the Savior Gavin holds Ezekiel captive inside the kingdom, and the 2 of them have a winding conversation about the choices they and/apos made. Again and again, Gavin reminds Ezekiel that he and/apos s always tried to be merciful, and that he doesn't and/apos like it when circumstances take a violent turn. Meanwhile, Carol and Morgan skulk around, looking for a way to sneak in and free the king. This all culminates in a moment where Morgan and/apos s preparing to assassinate Gavin, and Carol and Ezekiel try to convince him that he and/apos s a better man than that. Right before one of the kingdom kids they train does the murder instead. The point of all this is clear. Repeatedly, characters talk about what they have to do, even though they don't and/apos really want to. What Carl and/apos s saying, and Morgan and/apos s may be learning, is that, there and/apos s got to be something after. Killing in the name of peace isn't and/apos just oxymoronic. it&apos also driving everyone in this post-apocalyptic Virginia completely mad. It&apos tempting to see this as a turning point in the series, setting the stage for a different kind of Walking Dead - maybe one that isn't&apos just a heavy-handed dialectic, always ultimately landing on the side of survival of the meanest. But we&apos been in this place before, including at the start of last fall. What this mid-season premiere lacks is any kind of sense of where the story goes from here. It&apos telling that, in what feels like one hell of a padded out chapter, writers Matt Negrete and Channing Powell somehow cooled&apos find time for Maggie, Jesus, Gabriel, Aaron or, with one exception, Negan. There&apos still a lot of mess to clean up and a lot of human obstacles before Carl&apos vision can become a reality. From gourmet serial killers to vampire slayers, the greatest small-screen landmarks featuring scariest monsters and super freaks Negan, and Eugene as well, do make surprise appearances in the fantasy Alexandria, as beloved members of a peaceful community. But their very presence seems to suggest that this future&apos an impossibility. None of these characters are ever going to be merciful enough to share their delicious skillet cake with the men responsible for slaughtering some of their best friends. Instead, the more likely direction the series is going to take is to keep showing how these people are missing their best chance at paradise. That could still be an interesting and exciting Walking Dead. It has been before. But between the season premiere and now this latest episode, the brief glimpses we&apos seen of what&apos definitely coming, and not just what could be, are of more mourning, more regret, more scenes of a crying, bloodied Rick. There&apos bound to be some cold, dark months ahead. Best brace yourselves, folks. Previously, the sun also rises,